welcome to today's video. We're looking at a challenge set to us by Dina Tollefson. It's the hashtag Great Pumpkin Challenge, and what that involves is basically the colour orange. So I'm not doing a pumpkin, obviously. I'll be using orange as a predominant colour to create this autumn-like landscape. So it's not a massive painting, so I'm only going to be using fairly small brushes. I'll use this as a mop to go over a slightly more detailed brush, maybe this filbert, and possibly this rigger brush. So there's my brushes. Let's just quickly have a look at my paints. I'm planning on using that as an orange, and to lighten it down a bit I'll probably use one or two of these, or possibly this, and to darken it up I'll use an ultramarine blue. So again, it's a limited palette, it's going to be predominantly orange. In fact, I've got a picture I can show you that I did the other day that's similar to that. So this is a kind of practice image I did the other day, and this is what we're trying to do. The main motif was this guy fishing there. I've altered and changed the arrangement of the picture, and down here it'll have the deer instead of it just meandering off. So it is different, and I'm going to do it a slightly deeper orange. Just very briefly, I've got the paper anchored down with these little bull clips here. I prefer to do that these days rather than put paper around it that can fail. The paper itself is Milford by St Cuthbert's Mill, which is a company in the UK. They make Saunders Waterford as well. This paper is £140 knot, which is 300 grams for the UK people here, and it's a really nice 100% cotton paper that I'm testing out and using. So let's get on with the painting. Okay, well, I've decided that the light will be coming from this direction, so obviously this area is going to be lighter, and areas that are at this side of things are going to be darker. So let's get some paint on the paper. We're going to concentrate on the background first and put some sky colour in, although it's orange, and bring that down into the mountain. But what we need to do first is give it a reasonable wetting. I'm not going to overly wet it, but I've already made the mix of the paint ready, because you have to work fairly quickly. So I'm going to come down as far as that, and it helps you see where the water is. I've made a light water mix there, right, in that area. I'm now going to get my paint, which is a thicker consistency. I'm going to tip it ever so slightly, and I'm going to let gravity do its work. Now the video itself is showing it as being slightly yellowy, but it is very orange, this paint, I can assure you. And I'm also gonna like drop it like that. One thing I do need to do is get myself some do a bit of blotting. I don't want too much on that, on this area here where the mountain is. I want that to fade away a bit, and I also want it to fade away at this end as well. But always remember with watercolours, it will fade a lot lighter. Let me just get a little bit more there, maybe. There you go, and maybe a tiny bit more on that mountain area. Don't want to put too much on because there's this area here that's again another mountain in the background. But that's the far background roughly done, although we'll feather that out a little bit more, and that's a matter of leaving it to dry out for a while. So I've made some slight adjustments to the camera as it were coming out a little bit yellowy. This is a lot closer and truer to the orange that I can see in front of me in the painting. So let's now move on. While this is still drying, we'll block in some of the other areas of orange and try and be as delicate as we can with various tonal values. So this area here is going to be fairly dark, but at this moment in time we're just getting that first layer in, so it don't really matter about that. Just get that blocked in, have a bit of direction as well. Now the other opposite side, I want that to come down like that because that's reflection. That just represents the reflection for the time being. This also has a reflection here, so we'll try and represent that a bit. And this is fairly dry brush at the moment, as you can see, as it's hitting and missing, and that's what you want when you're doing reflections. So we've got a bit of that blocked in. Now up in this area, because the light is coming down and hitting this area a lot, it's going to be fairly white, apart from the odd bit of, you might get little bits like that where the trees are showing through, but not massively large. And I can see at this moment in time that's dry enough for me to be able to start getting some more orange in there. And again, it's a little bit of an hit and miss kind of thing, this, because I want areas to remain light, and this is a good time to get this area in. Now it curves round, so that area is going to be fairly light, and then it curves round to the opposite way, so this area is going to be a bit dark. Now obviously we're only putting the first layers in here, but I still want it to have that, so I'm going to be fairly light there and a much heavier application there. And we'll make sure there's like bits of greenery here and there. So that's the majority of the painting blocked in. The only bit we need to do now is the swirly bits in the river, and that literally can be just like that. To start with, that's a nice starting point. Now we're going to let all this settle, and we'll come back to it once it's all dry, and then we can start a new set of layers where we're going to start putting tonal values in. In saying that, I've still not got the rest of these trees in here. Not critical, but I'll do it while I'm... There you go. They're not... You got to think slightly abstractly sometimes when you're talking about distant images and things like that. It is best to think about things in a more abstract way rather than trying to paint each individual tree. I'm going to do this real background mountain. Obviously, because it's in the background, it has less detail, less colour value, so we're going to express that as a muted colour. So how do you mute orange? Well, the orange I've got mutes and neutralises with a nice cobalt blue. Now cerulean blue might do it as well, so I'm just going to mix up my orange and let's see, quite like that. But then again, we don't want it too strong. We only want it to hint at the fact that it's neutralised, not because we want to maintain the oranginess of it. We'll nip the edge away from this, make it a lot lighter, and then we'll move on to the other background mountain. In fact, actually what we're going to do is take some of that and bring it in a little bit like that. So same thing, a bit of cobalt blue, or if you haven't got cobalt blue, cerulean blue, but a lot more orange this time. So orange is the dominant, so it's just a dulled off orange. You'll see when I put it on. For example, if I put it there, although that's quite strong, so I'm going to wet the paint again and just do these top areas, because I don't really want it all dulled off. I just want this this top end here, like that, and it covers over that line mark. Well, hopefully it will. If not, you can still rub it out, so there's no big deal with that one. Right, so what we're going to work on is this edge here. We're going to feather that down into a soft rather than a strong line. So we just get some plain water and bring it like that. Well, that looks a little bit heavy, that. And we can go over that however many times we want to get that kind of toned out feeling, which now brings that more into prominence. So while this is still wet, we'll just dab out a little bit of these mountains. I'm going to make that quite light. And these are decisions you make to make sure that your tones are I really do want that to be, I want it to be strong there, but quite light as you go up. Keep dabbing away, making sure that you're not creating any hard edges. And you can do this to watercolour paint paper while it's still wet. It's a lot harder to do it when it's dried. Let's try and get a splash of autumnal colour into this tree area. I'm going to add a little bit of red to the orange that we've got. Make that fairly weak because red is a very, very, very strong colour if you're not careful. Right, and just flicks. I don't want it to overburden the image. And I'm going to do exactly the same with lighter colours. So I'm going to go to like a creamy yellow, or like a Naples yellow for example. Add that to a bit of orange, so it's all it's doing is it's toning it. And again, you've got to be careful with this because this can be a very it can really create an awful lot of problems for you if you're not careful what you're doing with it, because it's a colour that's fairly opaque. And my brush is a bit dry there, so I'm not picking anything up. Again, little bits of reflections of that in it. And the last thing I want to do with that is, because it's forest, it will have the tiniest bit of green left in it, dependent on what time in autumn you're painting it at, but it will have blobs of green here and there still. Now, right, so well, you're doing like a monochromatic, aren't you? Well, yeah, but what we're going to do is fade it in. That's the beauty of watercolour. You can suggest colours and fade it into the colours that are around it, and it gives it that extra bit of interest. There you go. And people will pick up on these little bits here and there, but that's all they are, the stragglers really. Tiny little bits. And it just adds to the overall quality of the image. Moving on from the background, we can now start coming into this middle distance area. We'll tackle that now. So there's some trees and a bit of land here, so let's get that blocked in. Well, we're blocked in, but what we want to start doing is defining areas so it's not just blocked in. We need to start making sure that these trees stand out. So the first thing I'll do is get my orange and make a fairly light colour. And trees are not my forte really, but I'm going to go, if I can get that to stop moving. And again, this is one of them things where it's in the middle distance. I'm not gonna do that much because light's gonna come. That's about as much as I want to do for that tree. And while I'm in that area, the bottom part of the tree is always pretty much dark, and let's see if I can not make a mess of this. So that will wet into wet, and if we need to adjust that, we'll come back later, and that's actually I'm going to nip bits out like that. So that's that tree. But for me, in that one tree there might be another tree there, but the other trees that I'm going to do around it are just going to be like little silhouettes. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to just, you know, just going to be blobs like that. They don't have to be as deep. Just choose one or two bits of things for detailing and leave the others as basic objects. So there's another tree that I'm thinking, yeah, that's worthy of becoming an actual thing that you know what it is, and that's going to go there. I'm going to do exactly the same as I did with last one. Introduce areas of dark with a brown, and all that's doing is toning it down a bit. I seem to have an air, the dreaded air, some yo-yo. And most of this is fairly dry brushwork, although I am getting a little bit of, I'm going to add a bit of a tiny bit of red to this one, just to add interest. And it's very subtle, because at this sort of distance you're not going to see a major amount of things like that. And then I might put some of that red in again, just to and soften it all up. We'll come back to this once it's dried up a little bit, but for now I'm just going to ground it a little bit. And making sure that this is fairly dry brush now, because I want that to look like rocky ground area, and that'll all blend into one eventually once we've got that done. Right, we'll get the reflections in there, and that's fairly simple. Reflections always come straight at you, so I'm just going to go like that. Always like the vertical, and obviously it's projected a little bit from the land, but where it's mostly prominent is things like that, the tree. I'm not going to overdo it. Key areas, just to let you know that is a reflection, and it always goes like that. I may come back and do some more focus work round that area once it's all dry, but we'll move on to this side of the bank, which is the next farthest part away. So light's coming in from this side, it's hitting everything that's facing that way, so that means this here is going to be a lot darker than anything that there, so that gives you an indicator of how dark this one will be, this side. So again, I'll use the orange, but rather than we've been using cobalt blue and cerulean blue and bits of brown. Well, from here on I'm going to darken the orange with a brown, a burnt umber, and then I'm going to make it really dark by adding ultramarine blue to it. With the orange included in it, it will make it slightly, because the blue and the orange are interacting, it's going to make it a very mucky green. But I'm going to add some more brown to it just to make it what I'm doing is I'm mixing my palette at the moment, which you can't see unfortunately. Right, I think I'm ready. One of the best things to do here is follow the line of the actual land itself. So I'm going to go, if I can stop that from moving. Like that. And then this bit here is going to be a different shade. That bit. And again we'll with this one I might just put some pure I know it looks dark at the moment, but hopefully it will lighten up that, just to make sure. Because there are areas that are a bit light, so I'm going to put bits of texture in like that, and we'll let that dry. We may have to go over that, believe it or not, to make it darker when it's dried, because it does dry an awful lot lighter. But while we've got these colours, just like that, I'll start putting these trees in that are prominent, that are just sticking out of the side here. I don't know how close they are to us, but I'm not going to be going into any great detail, because if you put high detail at this end, then the eye has a tendency to go to that particular place, and we don't want it to be going out of the picture, we want it to go into it. something I have seen that I might need to address. I can't remember. There's a tree that's on the other side of this piece of land. Now that's going to be fairly dark, although other side of it will be a lot lighter. So and I believe there's another one, although I'm just gonna splotches of darkness there. There we go. So that's that side for the time being done. So we'll concentrate on this area here now. With a fairly dry brush I'm gonna do this area, but I want to avoid putting too much dark around there. I just want to put hints of darkness here, so to show that light is hitting that fairly strongly, but also where there's light there's always going to be that contrast of areas where you're not going to get light hitting it. So it's a bit of a delicate balance this. So I'm using some of that what we used here, and well, very dry brush. I'll try and make it a bit drier than that. It's a bit juicy, this brush. Now I'm just generally flicking around, and it's to try and give it that craggy kind of bits of grass and things like that, but still give it the essence of it being on land. That now up here there's going to be some sprigs of trees and things like that, but that will actually blend into this area. You'll not actually 100% see all of that. So let's move up a gear with the dark areas. Definitely want this area to be quite dark. Then we go areas like that, and just suggest bringing everything towards you like that, so brush strokes that are directional. And I'll be nipping bits out like that and letting bits show through, and softening edges, not everywhere, but you know, in random places, because when you see nature you don't see solid lines everywhere. So that's one way of mimicking nature. So for the time being I'm going to get some brown and blue. I'm going to mix as dark a blue as I can get. Right, this is where it's the bottom of the tree. That's it, just a flick, and then bring. I think I might be best off doing it like that actually. I've not got enough paint on me. You barely see this because of other things that are happening around it. So I'm not going to go too over the top with that. Bring some of that colour down into there, and make it look spriggy and grassy, and then there you go. And we seem to have an area that's light but has also got interesting dark areas in it, and we've got the beginnings of this tree as well. So I've got a pathway to what that's doing. It's linking this piece of the painting into that piece, which links into that piece, which links into this. So it's all about linking stuff in this case, and just to make sure that we know that it's a linked thing. This area also has little bits of that. Let's bring a bit of that in. There you go. Using this smaller brush, I'm going to go back into this distant forest area and put some darker tones in it to give it a little bit more emphasis. But we don't want this to be overly strong. It has to be in keeping with the fact that it's in the distance. So it's only very delicate little bits of darkness, and in some cases you're not going to see that much of it. And again, whatever it is that you do in this bit of forest here, you're mirroring the reflection, but only a little bit. It is really distant stuff, this. You might get the odd little bit of dark there as well. Let's get some paint on his brush, and then we can actually show you what I mean. And that for me is that done. You may want to nip out some of the strong edges. And soften it up a little bit. There you go. Go back to a bigger brush, and I'm going to scrub out, now that's dry, some of the dark areas. So just pure water, that. Because although I want to show dark areas in this, I don't want it to be overly dark because the light is coming in this direction. It's just to nip out some of that darkness. And in a similar way, I want to do exactly the same with that. Right, I'll use this filbert instead, because that other brush is a little bit too soft for scrubbing out. So I'll get some water again. And if you can see that there's a little bit of an happy accident. I'm going to emphasise that. And this is just about getting texture into your painting, because not every area of painting is going to be super detailed. It's more about getting some bits of texture in and things like that. I'm going to darken that a bit. That's way too dark. If you ever put some paint on your watercolour and you go, oh no, it's a disaster, it isn't. You can always take it off if you've got decent paper, that is. So that area there, feathered, there you go. And we're not that far off completion for this part of the painting. What I do want to do is soften these edges and start giving you the idea that there's a reflection there. Although it will be a lot more intense, that, because it's a lot closer to us. In saying that, there's not a lot there to reflect, so it's not going to be a groundbreaking part of the painting, and it seems to come down like that, and I do see little bits of that branch there in it, which is nice, which I'm going to emphasise. So far away you get, the less intense it is. Making sure that you've got edges that are sometimes strong and sometimes soft, so you break bits away like that. Take some of that down there. Blend that in a little bit, see, it looks a bit too obvious, that. Right, so the only real bits we've got left in the painting to do is a few ripples, darker ripples in there, which I'm going to return back to my orange, because I seem to have neglected that by putting as and that's all there is really. Swirls. Don't overdo it though. Let's see if we can get rid of some of these hard edges. And just remember, the river is flowing, so if you can get some flow in it, that's great. I'm going to see if I can take a bit of that out, it's a bit strong there. And the more little bits of white you're leaving, great, that's helping a lot, that. Using a bit of dry brush there to just pull bits of paint together. Let that go. There you go. Don't want to overdo it round this area because it is in the distance again. So we've just got this to do now. Mr. Deer. Let's take it a little bit round there. Right, so first of all then, let's give it a basic over paint, and this by no means is the key element of the painting. It's an additional thing. The whole of the painting really should be what we're looking at. This is just an element within the painting, so I'm not going to be like faffing about with it. So getting your legs in there, and it's I won't call it abstract, but it's not a detailed painting in that sense. Not with the deer it isn't anyway. So let's start having a look at getting a mix of orange and some brown. So that's gonna be there. And just making sure that you can see the legs around there. I'm avoiding this area here with the brown as that's going to be where bits of light are going to go. So let's get its anklers. Remember, these colours don't match up to reality in that sense, because we're doing a colour that's based round orange. Everything's going to be orange bias. So for the light area, I'm going to lighten up some orange. That goes like that. So we basically blocked that in. Right. So what we now need is a very dark colour. So we're going to get a brown. And we're going to add a Payne's grey to it, and this is for the very dark areas, and you'll notice that that's just in certain areas. I really should be using a much smaller brush at the moment. So I'm going to leave that to dry a little bit, and then I can work on it a bit more, although I will start the idea of it's a shadow because light's coming in from that angle. There you go. Not absolutely necessarily, because you're not going to see all of that, but that's the main portion of the deer done. Although there's nothing wrong with having pencil lines in watercolour artwork, I'm not too happy about that line that is on there, and it's dried enough now for me to be able to do something about it. So very carefully what I'm going to do is rub it out. That will mean that I will have to work that top area again. So let's hope this all works and we don't ruin it. I'm very carefully, and I mean very carefully, nipping that back. I should have really done that when I did the drawing. just right. We'll now rework that by adding some of this. It almost looks like yellow ochre, but it is a mixture of brown and the orange. Make sure that that's nice and wet using my filbert, and all I'm going to do is like that. Now you might say, oh well, that's strong, but what I then will do is and soften it all out, and we'll still need to soften it out even more. There you go. That's a lot better. And introduce a little bit of that colour there. Now, because light's coming in from that angle, I'm going to lighten that just a tiny bit too strong. So from about there onwards, and we'll see if we can get some of that out like that. There you go, that's a lot better. We now need to deal with that, get some detail in, and we're not far off the finished piece of artwork. So I'm just going to get a trusty finishing brush. The area I want to really do is suggest an eye there. And keep emphasising the areas like that. And again softening it. Try and get a bit of emphasis on the shape of the area. Then one last thing. A dot. There may be a dot there, fuck knows. And that's about as much as I want to do on it, really. So this is the painting. I've tried to do it as much as I possibly can based round orange. Obviously it's got tonal values in it that I've used other colours to produce those tones, but the key colour in this painting is orange, and that's because this has been the Great Pumpkin Challenge, which is something that Dina Tollefson suggested to us to have a go at. So I hope this has been informative for you. I hope you have a go, and let me know if you do. And I'd love to have a look at what you do as well. So I'll hand you on to the next person who's in the challenge, and we'll see you in another video. Please like and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Thank you and goodbye.